Hi, everybody. Welcome to the March Supper Club. We have been doing a series on taking our faith, the values, the lessons that we learn on Sundays, and how do we take those into the rest of our week, right? So it's from Sunday to Monday. And we've been looking at different areas. We've looked at parenting, we've looked at work, we've looked at friendship, and this month we're going to look at your most significant intimate relationship, either a marriage or a partnership. And we know not all of you are perhaps currently in one. You've probably had them before. You can speak from that space of what was that like for you. But it's a rich area, and it's funny, we were said last month, I think this is the hardest area, probably
the work. Yeah.
And now I think it's marriage, actually.
Yeah.
But fear not, we have some help.
Yes.
Reverend Holly Hewer is a retired Presbyterian pastor from our presbytery, so we've known Holly for years, and currently is a spiritual director, has a practice, and we thought, you probably come up against this in your practice sometimes when people are wrestling with their own spiritual journey and how they share that journey with their partner. But before we get too far into it, Holly, just maybe a little bit more about yourself and your practice and how do you think about these things? Yeah.
Well, I do think that our relationships with others are actually the place where our faith is most revealed. That we can have all kinds of ideas in our heads, thoughts and aspirations, but the rubber really meets the road in our relationships. And most poignantly in our intimate relationships.
Vulnerably, it's frightening. I mean, it feels.
So, I did listen to the
one before,
interview on work, where you said, "Oh, that's the hard one," and I was shaking my head. I thought, no, because our lives are so exposed. Our values are so transparent. We might say something about what we believe, but how we live really reveals what we are made of, and what our values really are.
Can I interrupt you just one thing?
Yes.
Because I'm just so aware of that, of what, maybe you have this with Tim, our persona in church. It's even more extreme as a pastor because we're up there espousing the values of Jesus and live these lives of love, and then we go home and we are exposed as, really? You preached
Cranky,
that 2 hours ago. You were preaching love, and now you're...
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially as a pastor, it is, I feel that most vulnerably at home. And that vulnerability exposes, how shall I say it? What we believe and our values are rooted in the tenderest part of our soul. And we tend, who was it that said that our souls are shy?
Oh, that's nice.
We're timid about exposing that, so that most people see the protector part of us, the more defended part of us, the ego part of us, not that really precious place.
And yet we want that to be seen, don't we? I mean, there's this.
We do.
There's this,
We do.
more than anything in a way. It scares us the most, and it's the thing we want most.
And what we need for that shy soul to be welcomed is a container. And marriage is the container that we hope is the place where we can actually grow up and mature. And what we need is a place that we feel safe, where we won't be criticized, and and where we'll be treated with respect and kindness.
Right.
And we have all the anticipation that marriage will be all of that, and will
All
be
the time.
all the time, especially in those early blush days of curiosity about each other and tell me everything, and the tenderest things can be said, and then the years go by, and we begin to maybe not take each other for granted, but we're not as curious as we once were.
I love that idea of curiosity. I was talking to a new member the other day, and just the idea of this preciousness of a tender shoot of a spiritual yearning coming into this person's life. But it has not been part of this partnership or marriage. And so it's precious and tender, and to share that feels very vulnerable. And but it's authentic. So how to share that in this marriage in a safe way, and trusting that that container is there is a great challenge in marriage and partnering and friendship, in the same way. Like, how do you protect that tender shoot of growth?
Right.
And you had two words you were using when we were talking earlier that were helpful, things to bring into that space.
Yeah.
One was
Curiosity
yep.
and kindness.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of
Yeah.
to create that
Yes.
container
Right.
that's going to feel safe. You've got to be kind. They've got to feel like they can, that they're not going to
Yeah.
be taken. So let's talk about. The reason it's so hard is because, unlike a friend that you might talk to and describe some new growth, and it doesn't really impact their life immediately, or so they go, oh, that's cool, that's really great that you're exploring that. With our partners or our spouses, sometimes that can feel, well, whatever's happening to you is also happening to me, because
it's
we are.
requiring something of them.
That's right. If you're changing, does that mean I'm changing? Does it mean our relationship is changing? And all of the agreements that we have start to can feel threatened. So creating that safe container can be challenging if someone's coming in and wants to offer something new. It's still possible, obviously,
Right.
but it's trickier, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and I think that sometimes when something is new, we want other people to agree with us
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
so that we can feel like we're not alone. And it's so natural for us to want to have other people believe just
Yeah,
like
we
we
do.
do.
Right. Yeah.
See things like we do. Spend money like we do.
Right.
Spend time
Yeah.
doing things.
Right. It's
like
not just
we
in
do.
faith. This happens a lot in
Right.
marriage,
It's
other
all
areas.
that whole
That's right.
arena.
That's right.
And I feel that about most things, and the Enneagram was my biggest teacher,
Yeah.
we all see the world differently.
Yeah.
And especially when we're talking about the most important aspects of our lives. We may not share that with
Yeah.
a partner,
Right.
a spouse.
There can be some space, being able to have some space. There probably is a limit, you could just grow apart in
Yeah.
some significant ways, but
Right.
most of the time, I know what I've found in my own, as I explore something new in my spiritual life, like the Enneagram. I remember when I started doing that, or I was interested in kind of the Eckhart Tolle presence kind of thing, and when I was really interested in that, at first it was threatening to my wife. It was like, I don't get this, I don't understand why this matters so much to you, and we were in conflict then, and because now I'm defensive, because I want her to believe,
Right.
I want her to be all in, right? So I really appreciate that. What I realized, or what she realized, what we realized together, was that so many of the things I'm getting, the fruits of that work, were still things she very much agreed with and we had in common. So the greater patience or greater acceptance, she's like, okay, that may not be my path, exactly the way you're doing it, but your path is leading to fruit that is the same fruit that I want in my life. And so then it's like, okay, you can, you know,
Right.
do this or that.
Yeah, and what is coming to mind is that old quote from Khalil Gibran about marriage, that it's like two trees who don't grow too close together.
Yes.
Give those space.
And the pillars of the temple aren't so, but they're not too far apart.
Right, right.
But that the trees each are rooted in their own depth,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they can share that greater abundance.
Right.
Yeah.
You were talking about, you know, being able to come home from, if maybe your partner or spouse doesn't go to church, but can you come home and still
Share a part of yourself, and how authentically to share your spiritual experience without necessarily wanting them to change or assuming that they will come your way, but to not edit out that part of you or out of the marriage, that part of you that is precious and important, and so that there's not a resentment build up of, why are you spending so much time at church?
Right.
You know, why are you, or so much time at synagogue or whatever it is,
Right.
but how do you access each other so that you can understand there's a curiosity there?
Right. And I think that the easiest place to do that, in my experience, is where there's been joy and deep satisfaction. To be able to, like my husband was reading a whole different kind of spiritual work, and at first I was, that's not my, you know.
I don't think that's the way.
But I began to appreciate that was feeding him
Right.
in a way that nothing else
Right,
could.
right.
And the things that feed me didn't feed him.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do believe that's true for most
That's right.
most people in intimate
We're on different
relationships.
paths,
Right.
and so maybe more important than always being on the same, you know, reading the same books and having the same kinds of thoughts about things, is to be able to create that space where it feels okay to say, hey, here I learned this, or I heard this, and this is what I'm thinking about, and it's just this space where you go, okay, you know.
I think the stakes feel so high in the spiritual department of our lives, or our values, or our faith life. But it struck me that if I could, well, I can allow my husband to be a great skier and interested in skiing, and I'm not at all. But I don't hold that against him, and he doesn't hold it against me that I'm not interested in that or want to spend my time or money that way. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's hard to transfer that.
But that's
But
helpful,
that's
though. Could you bring that same energy of
Yeah.
curiosity and
Yeah.
kindness to
Just
these
saying,
areas? They
yeah,
feel a little
we don't
more...
need to be the same on
A
that.
little more personal, but still.
Holly, what tips might you have, like practical advice about couples that might want to deepen their connection around spiritual lives? Are there some practical things?
The first thing that I thought of, which was not what I had thought about before, was not to be afraid of difference. And even maybe not agreeing and having what we say conflict, that is actually the birthplace of new life together. So if you were at church together and heard the sermon and you had a strong opinion about it, and then your partner thought something differently, that's a place to explore.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and to be curious, why did you feel that way?
Yeah.
And don't tell the pastors if they're...
Don't tell the pastors that you disagreed.
Just leave them out of that.
What about, you know, I think we were talking earlier about prayer, and you know, Laura and I, you know, we've always said grace with our kids, but we don't pray together at night, or, you know, maybe a couple of times, you know, in real tragic kind of places we've gone there, but not as a practice. Partly, I think it would feel a little bit awkward and authentic. It'd be hard to get to, but I could certainly see for us spending some time in silence together in a silent prayer that could grow into words. It's the words that trip me up. Just to be totally, that's just where I'm at. But I wonder if it feels vulnerable even to say that and to say that on TV or the camera, but I think that would be really special, and we don't do that, and it could be.
During Lent might be an interesting
Got a Lenten
suggestion
practice.
to
There we go.
say, let's
Yeah.
sit in
So,
silence.
what do you think about that kind of?
Yeah.
You know.
I think that we all know those places that, we're just going to be comfortable and do the same old thing
Right.
all the time. But I think our faith is always pushing us into those places of exploration and one of the things that I say to every person that I work with almost in spiritual direction is that spiritual growth is cultivating a capacity to tolerate discomfort.
Absolutely.
So that discomfort of, should we try this? That is a spiritual gift.
Right.
Yeah.
And connected to that is the element of surprise. That there might
Yes.
be a great surprise in all of that.
And we want it. We want this, this thing that scares us is what we most deeply want, is
Yeah.
that to be known, to be seen, to be heard.
And to be real.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
kind of at the bottom of it
connection.
all is that's what we've been given
Yeah.
is this gift
That's right.
of being ourselves.
Yeah. Holly, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great to have you, and I feel like this was a very fruitful conversation.
Very fruitful.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Good. Glad you could do it. We do have some questions for you to think about. One, we know in places in your relationship with your spouse or your partner, your intimate friend, that there are places that are easier than others around faith and sharing. Places where you feel like you can share. So let's name those. Let's start with the places that are on the easier thing to do,
And then we challenge you to consider what areas would you venture into to take it a little bit deeper, to be a little bit more vulnerable about your faith? What would it take to do that? And we know you've told us that you don't always do these questions anyways, and that is great. So you can springboard for wherever this conversation
That's right.
took you, and we'll take this evening.
And we're also very aware that your partner or spouse might be sitting right there with you. They might be at home, and that's part of your dynamic, is that they're not as engaged with your church, or you might not be in a partnership right now. And we just trust that you can take the wisdom of this. And again, Holly, thank you. This was a really rich conversation. That you'll take it and run with it as you always do with your conversation tonight. So,
All right.
okay, thank you all. All right, have a good night.
Have a good evening.